Hello, you're watching Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. Today we are focusing on the heroes preserving the continent's biodiversity and looking at how we can use recycled materials. Well, it's time for Initiative Africa. Let's get on with the show with our top stories today. We met in Nairobi with Ofir Drori, an Israeli photojournalist dedicated to the fight against wildlife trafficking in Africa. He now works for the Eagle Network, a team of eco-activists and investigators who do not hesitate to delve into the world of crime and corruption to save endangered species.
That night, between seeing that baby chimp, being very frustrated from corruption and rescuing the baby chimp, I was writing down basically almost all of what we do today, which is a specialized NGO in wildlife law enforcement and in fighting corruption to get the law applied.
Recycling waste into eco-friendly paving stones for roads is an environmental solution that is making headway in Africa, and it's coming to Bamako.
It's to protect the environment. Plastics are non-biodegradable. It's an activity that not only helps to keep the town clean, but also to combat environmental pollution.
The Gabonese pangolin is a highly sought-after animal, trafficked for its meat and scales. Despite its protection, it is still being hunted by poachers and smugglers. For the Gabonese, the pangolin is killed for consumption. Pangolins are among the most popular game as bushmeat, in fact. We head for Bamako, the Malian capital, for this first report. In a country more threatened than ever by terrorism, the inhabitants have demonstrated an exceptional spirit of initiative and entrepreneurship. Take this young entrepreneur, for example, who proved that waste can find an unexpected second life. His solution is to transform it into eco-friendly paving stones, which will be used to cover some of Bamako's roads. The promise is a new aesthetic and unprecedented durability for urban infrastructure. Sayon Kourma, our special correspondent in Mali, reports.
In the middle of the day, an initiative comes to life in a quiet corner of Bamako, the Malian capital. Sheikh and his loyal assistants set about collecting plastic waste in a way that transcends appearances. Behind the seemingly simple act lies a crucial mission to promote environmental sustainability. Our cameras followed them on a collection day in Moribabugu, a district on the outskirts of Bamako. For this 23-year-old, this initiative embodies eco-responsibility.
It's to protect the environment. Plastics are non-biodegradable. It's an activity that not only helps to keep the town clean, but also to combat environmental pollution. Waste is gold. You can do a lot with waste, and it can be recycled.
Once the waste has been collected, the conversion phase takes place in the workshop. The recovered plastics are carefully sorted and then fed into the oven. The heat in the oven does the rest. The plastic melts, giving new life to what was once simple waste. This melted material is then poured into molds, creating ecological paving stones, ready to contribute to people's daily lives and improve the environment. In addition to its environmental impact, this initiative enables the young entrepreneur to generate 20,000 CFA francs a day.
We can do 2 square meters a day. With these 2 square meters, we can earn 20,000 francs. That's not bad. We're just getting by. The day we have the equipment, we need to produce large quantities, and why not generate a turnover of millions per day?
Beyond transforming plastic waste into paving stones, this initiative opens up new prospects. For Ibrahim, aged 19, this recycling project is much more than a simple environmental initiative. It represents a real opportunity for the future.
This is an eco-responsible project. We firmly believe in the future of what recycling represents. We are getting involved in the hope of becoming self-sufficient and developing ourselves independently. My involvement is also motivated by the fact that I can earn 3,000 francs a day, an amount that meets some of our needs.
With this in mind, the young entrepreneur highlights another innovative aspect of his initiative. The paving stones they produce have unique characteristics compared to those made from cement.
It's the finished product. These paving stones can last over 100 years with us. They can be used for both housing and roads. They are hard-wearing and highly effective, unlike other paving stones made from cement.
These paving stones will not be confined to the workshop. They now embellish the streets of Bamako, offering a new aesthetic and durability to the urban infrastructure. We visited Badalabugu Sima, where this 125-meter-long, 8-meter-wide road has been paved with cobblestones designed by Sheikh Koulibaly.
The whole road is cobbled right to the bottom. You can even see down below how it was done. Can you see? The 10-ton tippers drive over it without any problem. According to the engineer, it has a lifespan over 40 to 50 years. We'd also like to thank Sheikh for his contribution. These paving stones were made using very little sand, and the rest is plastic.
And Sheikh Koulibaly is dreaming big. His ambition is to turn this project into a thriving business in the heart of Bamako to combat pollution and reduce the risk of illness linked to this waste, a dream that is already coming true thanks to this promising initiative.
My biggest dream is to have the necessary equipment to increase production and satisfy our customers. I hope to have the equipment I need in the near future because waste is causing so much damage in our country, Mali. I thought it was time to find a solution to recycle this waste.
According to the Bamako Regional Development Agency, the Malian capital produces an average of 2,000 tons of waste daily. It ranks 16th out of the 25 most polluted cities in the world. The government is struggling to finance these growing needs. Still, it has announced plans to build 2 new modern landfill sites at Nubabugu and Mantugula to enable waste to be treated and sorted.
Nearly 400 monkey skulls from Cameroon were intercepted at Paris-Roissy-Charles de Gaulle Airport. That's the sad discovery French customs officers have just made. This highly lucrative trade in endangered species, which is difficult to eradicate, is the struggle of our guest, Ofir Drori. He's one of the founders of the Eagle Network, which specializes in the fight against wildlife trafficking in Africa. His work has won him several international awards and led him to write a book on the last great apes. He told our journalist Edwin Kariuki in Nairobi how he discovered his vacation during a trip to Cameroon.
Ofir Drori, hello.
Hello.
You're the founder of Eagle, an organization of eco-activists determined to fight wildlife criminals in Africa. And somehow, it all started in 2003 with you meeting a little Cameroon chimp called Future. What happened?
Well, it all started when I arrived to Cameroon as a journalist, in fact. I was following a lead by Jane Goodall, the primatologist, that if we do nothing about the illegal trade in apes meat, we're going to lose great apes within 20 years and many other protect the animals for the illegal trade, the international illegal trade. And I started this article following this lead, and in fact it was pretty easy for me to see how this illegal trade is rooted not in poverty or in small villages, but actually it is driven by the rich and the powerful. In fact, it was the same wildlife officers and police officers in charge of enforcing a law that existed that gives up to 3 years imprisonment to anyone even holding a chimp. It was the same people who are in charge of enforcing the laws that were actually driving the trade, running the trade in the first place. So, of course, corruption was the big thing. And I was finishing maybe 3/4 of an article showing the link between the international illegal trade, very organized one, a law that was put in place to prevent it, that has not been even enforced a single time because of corruption. So all this was pretty clear and was very easy to demonstrate as wild animals, protected wild animals, were sold quite openly. And there I went to try to find the light in the end of the tunnel for my article, which is the conservation world, the NGOs. And as I went there to get some optimism to my article, as I went there to see solutions for corruption, for the problem of enforcement, I found a far bigger problem, in fact. I found a very detached kind of NGO world that is talking about sensitization, talking about seminars, talking about workshops, but does not want to get themselves dirty with enforcement, and definitely not with corruption that would put them in conflict with some big people. And that's where I stopped the article, and during my research I saw a baby chimpanzee called baby chimpanzee that was about to die. That was an orphan, a survivor of the slaughter of his family. I ended up rescuing this baby chimp, and at the same day where I saw this baby chimp about to die and confronted firsthand with the corruption that prevents this law from being applied, and also this chimp from being rescued, I took the initiative to try to formulate what I see that is lacking in the system. And in that night, between seeing that baby chimp, being very frustrated from corruption, and rescuing the baby chimp, I was writing down basically almost all of what we do today, which is a specialized NGO in wildlife law enforcement and in fighting corruption to get the law applied. I rescued this baby chimp, and all that I've written in that night, I had to stay, be a father and mother to this baby chimp for a while, and the baby chimp actually forced me to stay and apply what I was writing, to show it's possible.
13 years after you started your first association, LAGA, in Cameroon, the Eagle Network is now established in 10 African countries. What type of criminality does it fight against?
Mm-hmm. Well, when we talk about wildlife crime, a lot of people are still thinking about poachers and poaching and some small things happening in a village. In fact, wildlife crime is the 5th largest illegal trade in the world. It's related to organized crime and other forms of crime, as drugs trade, human trafficking, arms trafficking. All these are many times related. So we are dealing with that layer, not the layer of the poachers that are sent by the bigger traffickers, but in fact international organized crime, criminal rings that are making a lot of money from the illegal wildlife trade, and that are activating the small poachers. That is connected a lot of times with high-level corruption. And that is why now, after this point of time, we were able to get into jail more than 2,500 major traffickers, arrested, convicted, and put behind bars. And that includes generals, that includes politicians, it includes a police commissioner, wildlife director in charge of the entire wildlife management of their country. This is the real wildlife crime. It's organized crime, high-level criminality connected to many other forms of crimes, and that is our work, to try to hunt them down and work with authorities to make sure they are arrested, convicted, put behind bars in the face of vast corruption.
Welcome back to the second part of our show. We'll be back with our guest Ofir Drori in a few minutes, but first I'd like to take a look at another form of wildlife trafficking, that of pangolins, which are highly prized for their meat and scales. Despite a relentless fight, some smuggling networks are thriving in several African countries, particularly in Gabon, one of the nocturnal animal's habitats, even though the animal has been listed as a protected species for several years. Our correspondent in Gabon, Jean-Rovis has been following the story, interviewing pangolin conservationists about the persistence of trafficking. Take a look.
In Lanope National Park, a few hours from the capital Libreville, a team of scientists anesthetize a giant pangolin. A transmitter will be installed to geolocate the species. The specimen, which weighs 40 kilos, will then be released into its natural environment. The fate of this animal, little known to the general public, is worrying researchers. The mammal, sought after for its reputedly tasty meat and its scales, has become the most poached in the world. Since 2020, the pangolin has been suspected by researchers of having transmitted the coronavirus. In Gabon, new laws have been passed prohibiting its capture, marketing, and consumption. On the stalls of this Libreville market, the species has been ratified and the traders have lost their best customers. Before the epidemic, the sale of the pangolin, although prohibited, was a good business. Chinese buyers came when the market opened to snatch up all the vendors' supply. Today, sellers are struggling to make even a small margin.
Before, people came to the market to buy the pangolin, but we were told not to sell it anymore. 1, it is prohibited by the Ministry of Water and Forests. 2, the pangolin is said to have brought the coronavirus, so we don't sell pangolins anymore. I know that people like to eat the pangolin, but we no longer sell it because we respect the instructions of the Waters and Forests Ministry.
The pangolin trade has been banned since 2016, but many Gabonese are unaware of it. The anti-poaching NGO, Conservation Justice, regularly sensitizes the villagers. But habits die hard. Conservation Justice claims that mentalities are progressing, but that surveillance should, however, be reinforced.
In several restaurants across the country, pangolin dishes are still offered to customers. But I think it would be interesting for the state to put in place a good mechanism, which already exists, of repression by enforcing the law, aimed precisely at punishing the authors and even the accomplices of this traffic here.
The scientific department of the national parks deplores an explosion of poaching around the species. For this biologist, it is not the meat sold for a few CFA francs that makes the value of the pangolin, but rather its scales, which are sought after at exorbitant prices on the international market.
For the Gabonese, the pangolin is killed for consumption. Pangolins are among the most popular game as bushmeat, in fact. And so the Gabonese will rush to these species for consumption. Now there's a traffic that has been reported internationally. So the traffic of scales that requires harvesting them directly from pangolins in nature, but just the scales are going to be kept. So there's a lot of pressure on pangolins for meat and for scales.
According to this scientist, the finding is striking in northern Gabon, particularly in Mekebe National Park, the largest of the 13 national parks bordering Cameroon, itself bordering Nigeria, real hubs where the kilo trades at 60,000 CFA francs before joining Asia, where it reaches 650,000 CFA francs.
I have not witnessed large seizures of scales like what is happening in Cameroon or Nigeria. For example, in Cameroon in 2017, I witnessed the first incineration of scales in Africa. And it was more than 3 tons of pangolin scales that had been incinerated that year, just after the pangolins were all listed on Appendix 1 of the CITES Convention, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. And then in Nigeria, I attended the seizure of nearly 7 tons of pangolin scales. Huge numbers. These are not figures that I have encountered here in Gabon. And it's not possible that in Nigeria, when there's a seizure of 7 tons of pangolins, that these 7 tons only come from Nigeria. You see, Cameroon and Nigeria function as hubs for the export of these illicit products abroad.
In Gabon, 3 of the 4 African pangolin species live in the forest, which covers 88% of the country. In recent years, the Gabonese Ministry of Water and Forests has increased its vigilance, and since the health crisis, new laws have been adopted to stop poaching in the country. This does not prevent sellers from multiplying strategies and sometimes ending up on dodgy markets.
Speaking of the giant pangolin, you should know that it is a fully protected species. Today, the other 2 species are also protected. There is regulatory text that has just been ratified, which also protects these 2 species. So anyone who exploits the pangolin becomes a pangolin trafficker. So anyone who hunts the pangolin automatically becomes the poacher.
According to Traffic, an NGO based in the United Kingdom, in 7 years, more than 330 tons of pangolins and their scales have been seized in Asia alone, compared to 609 between 2017 and 2019. The NGO explains that this drop is the consequence directly from the measures taken during the COVID-19 period. Authorities have adopted strict wildlife protection standards, and the country is actively working to have the giant pangolin classified as one of the most endangered species in the world.
We welcome back Ofir Drori for the second part of his interview. He explained to our journalist Edwin Kariuki how his group of eco-activists collaborates with African governments in investigations, arrest operations and the legal follow-up of traffickers.
While many organizations specialize in advocacy work, IGO has adopted a more decisive course of action, that is undercover investigations into criminal networks and following up on prosecution. How does this approach pay off?
Well, indeed, it was clear to us from the beginning that that crisis of the race toward extinction of those threatened species and the lack of enforcement acts as a justification for an NGO to take a step forward towards action, not to talk from the outside, not to talk about it, but to actually jump in, work with government in the field on the entire process, from investigations to arrest operations to the legal follow-up up to prisons. So on the 9 countries that we have, soon to be 10, in each country we have a team of activists, an elite team that has 4 different activities. The first is investigations. We have undercover investigators. Their role is to infiltrate the trade. Infiltrate, climb up the chain, try to get not the small poachers but the traffickers, and sometimes the bigger traffickers, and sometimes those corrupt high officials that enables that. Their role is to build trust with the traffickers up to a point where we can have a sting arrest operations and arrest the traffickers in the act. Now the second department that we have, second activity, is the arrest operations, where we work with the authorities in the field, with the police, with wildlife officers in the planning of these arrest operations, those sting operations, sophisticated way to arrest traffickers in the act. We are there in the field doing it with them. Next is the legal follow-up. It starts from actually the interrogations and assisting with legal advisors, the interrogations themselves, trying to get all the information from them and the charge sheet, charging them with those crimes. But it also continues to the actual legal process, to the actual trial, and it continues up to the prisons systems. So we have, we're assisting the governments with lawyers, with advocates that represent those cases on behalf of the state. But we also fight corruption through this entire process, which means that we are intercepting corruption attempts from the arrest level up to the legal level in the trial, up to the prison systems. So we even go to the extent of visiting our prisoners once a week to see that their human rights are being kept, but at the same time to see if they are there. Because criminals that are wealthy many times can get themselves out of prisons. So we are designed to fight corruption through this entire process. Corruption doesn't surprise us. It's not a nuisance. It is our reasons of being there and controlling it. Lots of times we have to monitor and see that somebody has bribed their way out, of course under the pretext that he escaped jail, and we work together with the judiciary very fast to kick them back into prison where they belong. And that's how it looks like when you're designed to intercept corruption and fight corruption, knowing that corruption is the #1 obstacle for wildlife law enforcement. In fact, our statistics is that 85% of all of our arrest operations, 85%, we intercept corruption. We have corruption attempts intercepted and combated. The legal system is equally disturbing as an observation. 80% of our cases, we can tell you who was trying to bribe who was trying to interfere, whether it is a bribe attempt, whether it is a traffic of influence where a high authority that is backing up a criminal ring is trying to interfere and trying to release that person from prison, for example, or from the trial itself.
Should there be more concern given the fact that the organization has unveiled many links between wildlife trafficking and international crime?
Indeed, we're talking about organized crime, and organized crime is not doing just wildlife trafficking. So many times we have arrest operations in which we see those links, whether it is drugs trafficking, whether it is arms trafficking, whether it is human trafficking, etc. I'll give an example of arrest operations that we had this year, in the past few months, in Cameroon, where two different occasions, two different arrest operations with the authorities were hitting the link between wildlife trafficking and the illegal trade in human remains, human skeletons. And in fact, in those two crackdown operations, two different rings were arrested. It started from our investigations on ivory, in fact, but two different criminal rings were arrested trading illegally with human remains. In one of them, it was quite impressionable. The traffickers were holding two suitcases, two trolley suitcases, and in each one of them was a skeleton of a human being, still with hair on his head. And when we do that, we understand that we are able, through our work with governments, to assist not just in fighting wildlife crime, but also making a dent in trying to assist in other criminalities that have been either unknown or untreated, and we try to help in that. Cyber criminality is another case. So a lot of times illegal wildlife trade is connected with cyber criminality, and we're able to assist those countries in some of the first arrests ever of cyber criminals, and trying to take wildlife law enforcement and the justice system to the future, where this will play a far bigger role. So that is what brings us more satisfaction, where we are able to hit human trafficking, drugs trafficking, cyber criminality, illegal trade in human remains as a part of the work that we do. And that is because crime is crime, and wildlife traffickers are traffickers first and foremost.
And that's it. Initiative Africa is over for today. You can find the interview of Ofir, Drori, as well as our shows on our website africaonair.com. And of course, feel free to follow us on all our social media channels by liking, sharing and commenting with the hashtag Initiative Africa. And don't forget, next week, same time, same channel, I'll see you again for a new edition of Business Africa. Have a great week, and until next time, goodbye.